Let's check in on some of the big international issues now with Michael Shoebridge from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Good to talk to you again, Michael. I want to first up get your assessment of what's unfolding in Lebanon. We saw that horrible explosion early in the week in Beirut. What it seems to have exposed is the corruption, the political turmoil, the fragility of democracy in Lebanon. What should we worry about as the consequences now play out?
Chris, I think you're right. What we need to worry about is who takes advantage of this situation, because you're absolutely right. Their political system is broken. It was broken for a long time before now. You've got to remember there were mass protests late last year that resulted in the Prime Minister having to resign and a whole reshuffle in politics, but it didn't change that weird sectarian deal that's been in place since the ending of the civil war in the early 90s. So that still means 18 religious groups each get particular spots in government. And strangely enough, that doesn't add up to a functioning and uncorrupt government.
And how important in all of this? How important in all of this is the terror group Hezbollah, and therefore the hand or the paw of the Iranian regime?
Well, Hezbollah now are seen by a whole lot of the Lebanese people as part of the problem. For years, they kept themselves a little bit apart from government and being associated with corruption and failure. But now they're right in the middle. They were already being held responsible back in the protests and riots late last year, and now they can't escape the blame. So for me, they're a concern, but the bigger concern is what space does it give to even nastier groups like ISIS? It's about 14,000, 18,000 active ISIS fighters just across the border in Syria. Do they seek to take advantage of this chaos? Yeah,
well, what a frightening thought. Let's just have a look now at some of what's playing out on the streets. People demanding answers, of course, as to how this explosion could have been allowed to happen. What we're about to see here is the Justice Minister responding to people demanding her resignation. Yeah, so obviously people wanting answers on the explosion, but as you've explained, it's exposing all the other fragilities. What role will Israel play in all of this? They're offering humanitarian aid and assistance. Obviously, they're seen as the enemy. Does this worry Israel because it makes Lebanon even more unstable and, as you say, exposes it to exploitation from really evil Islamist groups?
Absolutely. So I think Israel's main role is going to be bringing other international partners in to give emergency humanitarian assistance. So we've already seen Macron from France offering aid and saying he'll keep it free of corruption. The Americans sending in humanitarian supplies. Australia offering just a couple of $1 million so far. But this has destroyed a whole lot of their food stocks and the main way that food and food aid can get into the country, because 80% of traffic goes through that port, not the other port in Tripoli. So really Israel's going to want to bring the world to help the people of Lebanon, because if it doesn't, all that instability feeds straight into Israel's enemies.
Now let's switch around to our region now and China. Of course, there was a big announcement this week when it came to cyber attacks and Australia's cyber defences. At the same time, today we've seen Donald Trump crack down on TikTok and another Chinese app, worried about Chinese infiltration through technology. Is that what we're focused on in Australia too when we talk about cyber security? Is it largely directed at defences from China?
Yes, it's making Australia a harder target for the Chinese government and contracted hackers to the Chinese government to reach in. And remember, that's what the Prime Minister spoke about back in June. So the big focus in this new cybersecurity investment is in strengthening our defences in all of our digital systems across the country. That's critical infrastructure as well as telecommunications. But when you look at it from a what data can the Chinese get hold of for their own purposes, then Chinese-based apps and algorithms are a main way that they harvest the data, and that's really what the Americans are talking about.
Michael, thanks so much for joining us. Have a good weekend.
Great. You too, Chris.